All right, guys. Welcome to the Insurtech 2018 From a Dating App to #Relationship Goals webinar. We are, kind of just relating a bunch of articles, kind of relating startups and corporates to the dating world, into our plug-and-play ecosystem. So I hope you enjoy all the insights that we're bringing today from these fantastic panelists. It'll be about an hour long, so enjoy.
Wonderful. So thank you, everybody. So those who don't know me, my name is Hutch Maranye, and I work here on the insurance program at Plug and Play. I've been here for about 2 years, and in that time, it's been quite impressive to see so much traction in the marketplace, and we are so lucky to be a fly on the wall in so many of these great conversations. So for those who are not as familiar with Plug and Play, and I assume most of you are, currently Plug and Play is the world's largest corporate innovation platform, which is kind of a convoluted term and it doesn't say a lot. But the way I kind of take it to interpret that is through our technology accelerators, both in Silicon Valley and our 30 internationally, our 14 different industry programs, our events, our co-working spaces, our venture capital firm, all kind of combine to create this massive platform, which has two very main strategic goals, which is one, to invest in startup companies and empower those entrepreneurs to succeed however we think we can, and two is to drive innovation in the corporate enterprise, particularly through leveraging startup entrepreneurs. And today this has grown into quite a endeavor for us, but the insurance program specifically at Plug and Play has seen phenomenal growth over the last 2 years. So today we're looking at right around 80 official corporate partners. We've accelerated almost 200 startup companies. We've launched 5 additional technology accelerators in Singapore and Beijing, Tokyo, and Munich, and New York. And we're expecting to make about 40 investments this year into the Insurtech space. So that kind of speaks a bit to the volume of this ecosystem and kind of how we gather so much information and insights. Now, I personally have been able to benefit significantly from this platform by learning so much from the entrepreneurs and the corporate partners that we surround ourselves with. It's been an incredible journey, and I gotta say, there's really no better way to learn an industry than from the entrepreneurs who are trying so hard to disrupt it, and the corporates who are seeing things so well at a 1,000-yard level, who are now taking significant steps to change the way their business has been running for the last couple of decades. So when we go through all of that, we start learning, who are the major players, who have the insights that we think are the most relevant to the conversation, and who are the players that we think are actually going to move the needle in a significant manner. And we are very lucky today to have a number of them joining us on the conversation to talk about what it is that they're doing, what are their perspectives on the market, and how do they see insurance evolving over the next couple of years. Specifically today, we are talking about relating kind of the exchanges between corporations and startups to the dating pool. You'll see a lot of similarities thanks to Stephen Goldstein's article over here, where he talks a lot about, we're kind of in the, this exploratory phase of like meeting lots of companies and new people and kind of that early stage kind of relationship building. And we kind of think that 2018 was very much the year of exploring and the year of maybe a little bit more open-mindedness. And we're hoping that 2019 is going to really be the year when a lot of these pilots start converting to full-scale commercial agreements and the corporate partners start dedicating their free-spirited dating pool to a more specific engagement with a number of these companies. And so really excited to hear what our partners and our startups have to say about that today. I know that was a bit long-winded, so thank you guys all for sitting through that with me. To get things off, we have a great panel, and I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves. And you also see we have Erica on the line as well, who is our wonderful colleague who's joined a couple months ago, who's really been the one to champion these new webinars that we are starting. And with the help of Katie, they've been doing a great job getting this off the ground. So thank you to everybody involved. With that, I'd like to let the panelists introduce themselves. If we want to start with Satchadu, if you could say a little bit about your background and what your startup company does today. And if you could share maybe a line or two on why piloting is so important to your business model.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Hutch, and thanks so much, everyone, for being here today. And so my name is Shatadru Gupta. I'm the founder and CEO of Hello's Insurance. I started my career in insurance with Deloitte Consulting, and then moved to Liberty Mutual Insurance on the consumer side, and then moved to AIG after financial crisis and leading the global distribution analytics in the commercial insurance. After that, I joined DataRobot when it was about 20 people, and in 2015 in the pre-revenue stage, and built the insurance practice there, ran it, and then left earlier this year when we were about 450 people over 3 years. And that's where I started working with Plug and Play very heavily. And it was one of the leading go-to-market strategy for us, and we're part of the accelerator program as well. So very recently, I started Hello's Insurance. That is a loss preventive insurance platform. And we are right now building the product, started with Techstars MetLife Accelerator program, and we are here today.
Wonderful.
And Hutch, I actually missed the actually, what you asked me to cover in the very end. I missed that. Can you please repeat that for me?
I was just saying, why is piloting important to your business today?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So piloting is the biggest reason is that we are selling to insurance companies. So we are developing this insurance, loss preventive insurance platform, and existing customer of insurance company would be using it to make sure that they can prevent loss whenever they can in the home insurance context, in the driving with teenagers and elderly, and for life insurance. And Hutch actually was talking about it earlier, I guess, during our preparatory time, that whenever we think about building a product in the right way, it should be coming from the consumer. It should be building something that consumer love. And that is so important. So insurance company has that a huge exposure to the consumers. So that's a channel for us to do the pilot so that we can get the feedback from consumers. So that would be the primary reason at this stage.
Perfect. Kind of following with the startup theme, I would like to introduce my good friend Simha over here from Usher to introduce himself and talk a little bit about what they're doing.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Hutch, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure talking to our partners here at Plug and Play. And thank you for introducing me and inviting me to be part of this panel. So I'm the founder and CEO of Usher, 4.5-year-old company, which is basically disrupting the enterprise workflow business. So we are in the business of automating and accelerating a variety of different types of service engagement workflows for a broad set of target markets. But specifically in the context of insurance, we accelerate a wide range of top of funnel and cost optimization service workflows for companies. So I've been at it for a little over 4.5 years now. We are a venture-backed company, recently raised a $12 million venture round. We have significant traction in the market. We have several Fortune 500 companies that use our platforms. And what I want to share with you today is some of my experiences and the journey that Usher has been in terms of how we have evolved, and also why some of these practices of going from a proof of concept or a pilot leads to better outcomes, not just for us as a startup, but also for the companies that are piloting our technology. Most companies typically, especially if you're a platform company, platforms really don't make great business models. You have to actually create applications and show people how to use applications of your technology. And it's true in our case as well. So we have a broad set of tools in our toolbox, and piloting is an opportunity for us to demonstrate taking one specific problem that is relevant for a key stakeholder that wants to see whether the platform has the ability to solve that problem, but more importantly, whether the broad set of tools allows the enterprise to deploy a future-proof platform, not just to solve this one problem, but also many other problems. So that's basically where we are at, and we have had a number of pilots. In fact, the way we got introduced to Plug and Play was through introduction from one of our customers who is a corporate partner of Plug and Play. And hopefully I can answer a few more questions and give some more insights into what we do as a business. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so from there, Chris, you still on the line, and I'd love to have you kind of share a little bit about what you do at Excel Innovate and why this is an important question for you guys when evaluating startup companies to invest in.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me, Hutch, and really love what you guys are doing at Plug and Play. You've really accumulated an impressive ecosystem, and it's always a pleasure to be speaking with the folks that are associated with it. So I am with Excel Innovate, and Excel Innovate is an Insurtech-focused venture fund whose sole LP is AXA Excel. We are focused exclusively on the P&C market today, and within that, obviously, anything related to Insurtech. So our fund's been around for over 3.5 years now. We have made 14 investments. Those investments have ranged anywhere from the seed to the Series C stage. And I guess as we think about our investments today, they really fall into 3 buckets. The first is companies that are addressing emerging or underserved risks. The second is data and analytics companies, and the third is new insurance models. Across those 3.5 years, we've made 14 investments. A number that you may or may not have heard of are Lemonade, Slice, Cape Analytics, and Broker, just to name a few. But obviously, as we evaluate investment opportunities, we need to understand, at what stage are these insurtechs engaging with the incumbent carriers, and really understanding, are they experimenting, are they at a proof of concept stage, or are they at a full enterprise license stage? And really, what that allows us to do is understand the trajectory, the momentum, and sort of helps us understand, are these insurtechs really solving problems that are important to these carriers? So that stage, that, I guess, quote unquote dating perspective, is something that we take a close eye at, and really helps us understand and guide our investment thesis.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And Chris, it's always great to hear from you guys. Thank you for always being so willing to join us, and the kind words. For those in the audience, if you think buttering up Plug and Play will benefit you, then that's absolutely correct. Finally here, I'd like to introduce Stephen. So Stephen is actually the inspiration for this topic here today, with his wonderful article on the comparison of relationship building and dating to piloting with startup companies. Stephen and I, we would have gone way back, actually, a couple of years now. We were one of the very first people I reached out to when we kind of got involved in the Insurtech space. So it's great to finally have you out here, and congratulations on some of the recent moves you've made. And we'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective and why you wrote this article.
Yeah, thanks, Hutch, and thanks you guys for having me on. And I'm honored that you guys were inspired by the article to have this webinar. So my name's Stephen. I've been in the insurance industry for about 12 years now. I kind of started as an agent, wholesaler of annuities. I've worked across the US, Europe, and Asian markets. Recently moved back to the US last year and just started with RGAX about 2 months ago. RGAX is an interesting organization in that we brand ourselves as the transformation engine of RGA. RGA is the third largest life and health reinsurer globally. And as X, we started off as kind of an incubator and a venture capital fund. So we were building technologies that we saw our life carrier partners needing as part of the overall value chain. And we started making investments in companies where we thought we could get access to specific emerging technologies that are helping those value chain, and understand how it's helping our carriers that we partner with from a reinsurance standpoint. This year, we acquired a number of businesses, primarily along the insurance services standpoint, looking at reinsurance administration, underwriting, and claims. Within RGAX, we kind of position ourselves that we're helping carriers across 4 different verticals. Those verticals are digital distribution, consumer engagement, data and analytics, and those insurance services. My new role as the client experience lead for the Americas, I look after the US, Canada, and Latin America markets to try and see, of all these businesses and service offerings that we're bringing to carriers, how we can most effectively engage with them, identify what their pain points are across the value chain, and what sort of solutions we can bring to them to make sure that we enhance either their end-to-end consumer experience that they might be facing, or their interaction with reinsurers in terms of the data that they share between their company and the carrier or the reinsurer that they do business with. The reason I wrote this article, so I've been on the carrier side, I've been on the startup side, and now I'm on the reinsurer side. And I can see, well, and I'm also, probably too much information at the moment, but I'm also single at the moment. So I can draw a lot of parallels to, I guess, my own dating life and how I was going around as a vendor of sorts to actually provide and just show our services that we're offering. And I think being on both sides of the equation, there's a lot of parallels there. And there's I think a lot of people, when you go to these conferences, you go to Plug and Play, you see how people are interacting. Sometimes people are a bit lost because they're just trying to get in front of as many people as possible. And I think if there's a slightly better structured plan as you look at how you engage with them at the initial front, how you engage with them when you're actually doing some business in a pilot or POC phase, and then how you engage on that scaling phase, if you plan a little bit better, it's going to help make those partnerships much more strong. And to your point, Hutch, as you said, 2018 is really around kind of getting up to speed and really understanding what the market's offering. I think as we get to that stage where people are going to start doing more pilots, scaling more, having that structure and rigor around it is going to help both sides to do things better.
Absolutely. So thank you guys very much for all joining us. We have access to a lot of people here at Plug and Play, and we chose this panel very deliberately, and a lot of people who we have a lot of respect for. Simha is a great example of a founder who has really been able to successfully carry momentum from the pilot into commercial deals, who's recently signed a number of large commercial deals, which is a really great indication of his competency and the quality of his startup company. Satchadu is a great example at Data Robot, bringing on many large carriers, but that's a much later stage, growth stage startup company or technology company. And so I'm really curious to hear his perspective on, what that was like at a growth stage startup and what's that like now today as a startup founder of a small new startup company, and how those differentiate. Chris Downer here is one of my favorite thought leaders and a good friend. Very impressive what they've done over at Excel Innovate. And anybody listening today, I would really highly recommend subscribing to his newsletter and checking in on some of the articles he's writing and the other things that they're sharing, because his POC Purgatory article really resonated very well with me a couple months ago, and I think speaks very well to the conversation we're having here today. And obviously, Stephen here, this is literally all as a result of what you wrote. And we've had lots of great conversations. And for those also listening in, I really encourage you to check out some of his other work. I really love the article you wrote on POC auto claims and really unbundling the different parts of the value chain and figuring out where you can implement strategic innovation initiatives. And so I just wanted to say, that everybody on this panel has a very unique perspective and a great track record. And thank you guys for being here, and I'm really curious to hear what you guys' interpretations are, and this is going to be pretty open. So, if we find a topic that one of you guys bring up that another panelist would like to dig into farther or ask questions, feel free to do so. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Michaels, who's going to get us started with the first couple questions.
Hey guys, thank you. So when we think about these dating apps, and Stephen, you might have had personal experience with such as Bumble, Tinder, some of those out there. Users tend to write quirky little interesting facts about themselves, maybe some pictures of them traveling, maybe in Machu Picchu or somewhere pretty exotic. So you think of that and translating it to the startup world, kind of what, and you mentioned this a bit earlier, Stephen, what type of materials does one need, and what's, from a startup perspective, and I guess from a corporate perspective, you're trying to find this match. So I guess let's start from the corporate perspective.
So kind of like how to make a best first impression.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting. I'm sure all of us on this panel and everyone on the call has been to one of these conferences that has Brella, and I know that's quite often used at Plug and Play as well. And even Brella is kind of a pseudo conference dating app, right? You click off your things that I'm looking for and the things that I'm offering, and then you put a little blurb in there. You set up these 15-minute meetings, and then you sit at a table and you talk for a bit. I think really from a corporate side, you need to be upfront about what it is that you're looking for. So there are some corporates out there that go in and they say, you know what, I just want to see what is out there. I want to see if I can get some ideas. I'm not really looking to solve for a particular pain point, but I just want to kind of get some ideas that I might be able to bring back to my organization. In some cases, they're very specific, saying, I'm here to find this need, and we've got this pain, and I need to find a solution provider for that. And I think just being upfront and saying, this is kind of what I'm looking for, will help guide the people that they're talking to through that kind of speed dating process in terms of what they're looking for. When they have those calls, I guess afterwards, and if it's not so organic through a conference, it's the same thing. Just being very clear about what you're trying to do as an organization. And I mean, jumping forward a little bit, startups should be able to very clearly know whether, you know, from knowing their own value, whether they can solve that problem or not, and they need to be upfront as to whether they can or not.
And to Chris, I'd like to hear you next on this one, on the context of, you know, when you're evaluating startup companies or they're reaching out to you and whatnot, you're in that very first initial phase. I mean, most VCs, they can tell within the first couple minutes or even less than that, if they see synergies, if it's a good fit, if they want to have a follow-up conversation. What are things that startup companies do really well, materials or presentation skills that really makes that first introduction, that first engagement, particularly valuable and really gets you guys hooked for follow-up information?
Yeah, I think there are really two things that we focus on. The first is knowledge of the problem they're looking to solve. You know, we want to make sure that the person or the company that we speak to really understands what they're looking to do and clearly understands that problem, because without understanding the problem intimately, you can't bring a solution that makes sense to these carriers. So that's critical for us, and sort of that deep expertise in whatever area they're focused on is really important. And then I think the second thing is focus. We've seen a lot of startups that come up and say, look, I can do these 10 things for you. And while those 10 things might be impactful, given that startups are often smaller organizations that are pressed for cash and can't do everything at once, I think that to us often is a red flag. So we like to see really intense focus on a specific issue. And so I think if you're bringing that knowledge and you're bringing that focus, that is much more appealing to a carrier, because a carrier can then say, all right, I understand the value proposition of this company, and therefore I don't need to sort of wade through multiple meetings to say, okay, so you say you can do these 10 things, but I really need help on these 1 or 2 things. And so I think we found those conversations really accelerate with that intense focus, and really seeing startups do well as a result of it.
I think that's a really good point. It's something that I talk a lot about. My team is tired of hearing about it, but I call it the Swiss Army knife problem. In the context that a Swiss Army knife sounds great, it's got 10 tools, it solves all your problems. But if anybody's ever used a Swiss Army knife, you know that all 10 of those tools are pretty much useless at anything you're trying to accomplish. So again, it's really good about focusing on building a scalpel, building a chainsaw, and you know, making sure you're coming to the table with something that's going to be very effective at its core competency. Kind of switching over from the startup perspective, Simha, you know, you've had a lot of, you know, first introductions and things like that at Plug and Play. I'd say you're quite a power user on the dating app, if you will. What has been successful for you? If you have a short period to kind of get your point across to somebody, what are the key things that you either want to bring to the conversation, say in the conversation or whatnot, that really has a high follow-on rate for next conversations?
Yeah, so my experience is that usually in a meeting context that is largely like the Brella, you know, networking event, or maybe even a deal flow session, you have about 10 minutes or maybe 20 minutes tops to make an impression about what your platform offers. But it's important to not use all of that time to just talk about what the company is about. It's important to understand and learn about the problem that the customer is looking to solve. So, so there's a listening phase, and then there's a pitching phase. So it's important for entrepreneurs to think about, you know, listening in and understanding what the problem that the customer is looking to solve, and then finding a direction of being able to deploy the solution, from a platform perspective, and being earnest about it and honest about it. Sometimes it's better to walk away from an opportunity if it's not directionally aligned to where the company needs to go, rather than taking on every opportunity and doing a lot of customizations. And startups are all about focus, and they're all about repeatability, and that's the key, right? So you can't keep doing one-offs in these pilots. So finding a good match where you have a problem that a customer brings, and knowing that you can actually solve it with the tools that you have. I think establishing that synergy within the first 15-20 minutes, I think that takes a little bit of skill to demonstrate. And then there'll be opportunities to do subsequent demos and dig deeper into a POC conversation. So that's typically what my experience is. The first, I've sold to opportunities in an elevator, literally as an elevator pitch. I've sold sitting next to people in an airplane. These are all unique situations, and being able to talk to people and understand their problems and resonate and talk in a way where they understand and grasp the solutions that you have put together. I think it's a evolution for an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think I like that a lot because it really speaks to the concept of luck that we discuss a lot. And how many relationships do you know that met on a dating app versus how many were a complete happenstance situation? It's phenomenal the amount of entrepreneurs that I meet who have had just randomly bumped into somebody that was so unbelievably impactful in their success. It really is about putting yourself out there, being prepared all the time. I know founders who pitch from sun up to sundown and long after that. And it really is about open-mindedness, having lots of discussions, creative problem solving. And I think that only really does happen when, like you said earlier, is like really understanding their problems, coming up with creative ways of solving it, not just throwing out a solution at them and having them and then having them figure out how to use it. It's, hey, what's your problem? Like, what are you guys dealing with? Well, here's my experience with that problem. Here's the solution that we've built, and you only have to really drive home the points of the business model that solve that problem to get them kind of engaged. And then finally, Sajadu, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You were in a panel I saw in ITC kind of talking about pilot best practices and things like that. So, kind of curious to hear from your side, as you're starting this pilot side phase, as you're opening up a new company, are there things that you are going to prioritize in that process that you may do differently today than you would have done a couple of years ago?
I think from my perspective, what is the biggest attribute of a successful founder as we sell our product to insurance companies and we send our product to consumer is that we have to be a quarterback. And why we have to be a quarterback? Because we have founded our company because we have seen something that market did not see before. And sometimes it is not articulated well. Sometimes it is a problem that is not well understood. So we have to really lead, our customer, that could be insurance company, that could be consumers, that this is the problem that we are solving. And as we have that conversation would be in a language that they can understand. So what we did at DataRobot very successfully, DataRobot was founded by people from insurance companies, and it was an automated machine learning platform that can be used in insurance companies, but also in banking, healthcare, and many other industries. And the reason that we are very successful at the deal flow session that was organized by Plug and Play, and that was one channel and other channels as well, because we did not really create a cognitive burden for insurance companies when we started telling them that this is what we do. We had a conversation that they can understand. They can understand the language, what problem we are solving, and so on. Now, that was one of the biggest learnings. And what Chris's article talks about also, and we applied that from day one, is that planning it well. And there is this very good quote in the book, The Art of War, that every battle is won before it was fought. So we every single, like, during our first conversation, even if it could be 15 minutes conversation, it could be 1 hour conversation, we usually paint the whole picture that today is the first day that we are talking about, and we show that vision to them and to our customer, that okay, or to our prospectives, that this is where we are going. And going to Stephen's article, that if you are staying with the analogy of dating, this is kind of the belief that we want to grow old together. If we want to grow old together, this is what we are looking at, like in our 5th month, 6th month, and in 1 year from today, 2 years from today. And that kind of is very inspiring to our customers, that okay, this is not only a product, but it is bigger than that. Like, there is a vision that will change our company completely. And the third thing that we do that is pretty clinical, that we had a very rigorous qualification process where we used to ask that who is paying, who is going to use that product, and net how the world would be a different place for us, for our customer, not for us, but for our customer, because of our product and services. And that understanding actually, we are not going to just sell, but it will make a difference in their company, their organization. That was a huge reason for the success. So we had all these things discussed upfront, and we did not really wait to figure this out or in an explorative fashion. So I always used to call, like, all the successful proof of concept or pilot were the validation proof of concept of pilot. We already knew what we want to validate throughout this testing period. We did not try to explore something that we did not know. So that is kind of the learning at DataRobot. In my new company, in Hello's Insurance, that I started 4 months ago, we are developing a platform that would be helping insurance company to prevent loss for their consumers. And that will have impact on reducing frequency of losses and the severity of losses. We are tapping into sensor-based data. We are tapping into service provider from different home side for auto and the life side. And we are connecting those dots and making sure that we are observing right data and applying machine learning to understand the early warnings and etc. But also we are giving feedback to the consumer and guiding them how they can actually prevent losses whenever possible. So that's the company. Now, if we think about loss preventive insurance, it is very unmet and unarticulated need for the customer. And there is a very good quote by Brian Greene. He's the Columbia University physics professor. And he said that sometimes attaining the deepest familiarity with a question is our best substitute for actually having the answer, right? So as a founder, as a starting company, oftentimes we know the question. I think Chris was talking about the same thing. We know the problem, but a pilot and the proof of concept is the only way to zero in on a solution, zero in on the answer. And so our focus as we are starting the company is very simple. We are right now creating a product machine that we can build the product very quickly with our engineers, and we can tweak that product very easily as we get feedback from our customers throughout the proof of concept and POC process in our early days. And throughout that process, we can test, learn, and iterate very quickly. So that's the goal. So the goal is not to build a product which is fixed and send that product to the market after 6 months or 12 months, but send the product to the market as soon as possible and then test, learn, and iterate through successful proof of concept and pilot. So that's how we are doing it right now. But the fundamentals of thinking about everything a little bit ahead, and then as we are engaging with partners, that could be insurance companies, service providers companies, etc., just aligning the vision is very, very important. Showing that how we want to grow all together, that is a very important concept, going back to dating analogy.
Absolutely. And one of the things I think is really, really important here, and one of the key learnings I've noticed that's different from Silicon Valley and the rest of the world. I've had the pleasure of traveling all over the world this year and meeting startup companies from everywhere. In Silicon Valley, the startup companies are very open about what they're building, and they're willing to show you immediately. If they have an idea, within the next couple, they'll probably have some sort of prototype, and they'll be showing it to random people getting feedback. They're not hiding in a basement. They're not keeping it secret. They're not a super stealth kind of concept, because they know that if you spend 2 years in a basement secretly building on something, it's likely you won't have product market fit because you never solicited feedback, right? So the ones who are very fast to market, the ones that excel quickly, it's because they pilot quickly, they show people what's working on, they solicit feedback in a continuous loop constantly, and they get to market faster, they have better product market fit faster, and they're successful far more frequently. And so the other beauty of listening is looking at the startup world. I encourage you, really get out there, really show people what you're working on. Obviously you don't give up your secret sauce, but piloting and exposure is the only way to solicit feedback and understand the problem as best possible. And it's such an unbelievably crucial element to being successful. And that's something that you see in Silicon Valley very plainly. Don't see as much in other places. And if you're a VC or a corporate who wants to bet on a startup company, I personally want to bet on the entrepreneur who's willing to show the world what he's working on or is working on and be like, look, I can even give you my blueprints. It doesn't matter. I'm so effective at what I do that 6 months from now I'll be beating you even if you have my blueprints or not. And that's who you want to bet on. I'm going to turn it back over to Eric for our next phase.
So moving on, following Steven's article a little bit more. So we're on kind of stage 2 now. I'm not sure if many people say going steady anymore, but about going steady or about seeing someone, I would say. So let's say now you've gone on a few dates, talked about the values, expectations, even about to meet the parents and get initial approval from the corporation. From the corporate perspective, this is a two-way street, right? How can you be open and welcoming to a nervous founder about meeting the parents and this new significant, meet others, and others in the family? So we thought there's a lot about setting the goals, outside of that. What else can be achieved outside of that pilot framework?
So sorry, to repeat the question real quick, I think you kind of timed out there a little bit, Eric. So the next phase, the meeting the parents, the getting abducted into or invited into the family and whatnot, as you're kind of getting that startup company circulated among the team, among the other business units, getting traction and kind of moving on to successful partnership. From the corporate perspective, what are things that you guys do or notice as really successful in terms of being able to bring that company comfortably within the organization? And I know Chris and Excel, you guys have done a very good job of this. And from the startup perspective, what have you guys noticed in the corporates that you guys are working with that were conducive to a particularly effective relationship internally? We'll start this one with Steven.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, I guess so. So now you've kind of proven it. You've shown them that you're in the door and that you want to build something. From the startup side, most startups, unless you're really just, this is your first engagement, most startups will have probably done a couple pilots or POCs with carriers. As all of us know that are in the insurance industries, carriers have the most probably due diligence requirements of any other industry out there. And understanding what sort of things that they're looking for and seeing how you can kind of almost serve it up on a platter to help them get along with their security and their procurement processes is going to be huge. The second thing is I think the startup should know a little bit about who in the organization is actually going to be imperative to understanding how this thing is going to roll out. And they should guide the carrier along that road. And equally, the carrier should be then taking that advice and communicating it to the various people that are going to be implementing it, or actually not even implementing it, but running it once it's live. I was part of a company earlier this year, and we did a pilot with the carrier. We worked with the core project team. There was predominantly IT and some of the innovation folks. And we built this pilot. We had it all ready. And right when we were ready to give the pilot results to the business, they were like, oh, we didn't even know you were working on this. What are we supposed to do with this? Can you walk us through what you've started? So it was almost like walking back 6 months to go back to the beginning to bring the business now along the journey. If you know that you're going to have business units, whether it be distribution people, marketing people, operations people, you need to bring them along that journey easily. Most IT people, especially entrepreneurs that have built the technology, can probably implement something pretty well. Making sure that it meets the business objectives and those KPIs. I think Satyajit mentioned it. Whether you're helping a company to save money or increase revenue, aside from solving those pain points, those are the two key things that matter, right? You're not just improving a process. You're improving a process to save money. You're improving a process to make money. And if you can, are we on mute? Oh, okay. So if you can help guide that carrier along to who needs to be involved in the conversation from day one, and the carrier is very clear about getting those people on board from day one to bring them on that journey, that's going to help that implementation that much more. Because if they don't, and they bring it to them and they say, hey, we've built this really cool thing for you, test it out. And they go, I don't need that, or doesn't meet my requirements, or not user friendly, or, then whatever time was spent during the pilot is just going to be a waste. So I think making sure that you get the right parties involved and bringing them on that journey from the start is super, super important.
Absolutely. And it's a mistake we see more often than not. I can imagine, to put it in the context, I don't think any of you would be happy if you came home one day and you found out that your brother or sister or some guy was married and you hadn't even met the person and they were introducing you at Thanksgiving dinner. You know, it's never a comfortable conversation for anybody, and it's not going to work within a corporate context either. Satri, I'd like to turn it over to you, particularly with your experience with Techstars. You know, how was your experience kind of getting integrated into the MetLife environment? Was it very comfortable, landing pad? And how instrumental was that in your success in being able to find product market fit?
Yeah, so with Techstars, like, you know, we started early, right? So I was incredibly lucky to co-founding the company along with the program. So usually most of my fellow 9 companies, like, you know, they came little later, like, you know, some of them are there for the last 2 years, some of them are last 1 year, and so on. So,
sorry, real quick, just provide a little context. This is a private accelerator for MetLife, right? So this is also being integrated into the carrier while this is running the Techstars program.
That's right, exactly. This was right. So the MetLife, it was a single corporate partner along with the Techstars. Techstars has similar program with Amazon, Alexa, and then they have Rakuten and many other people. So it is little different model. And what MetLife did, it was a strategic initiative. So going back to Stephen's point as well, like, you know, it was a very clear to the organization, to MetLife, that why they are doing it and who are the people who are responsible to make it a success. And we completed the program. It was a 3-month program, and we completed the program in October, mid of October. And after 1 month, I still had a call with them last week, I think, or earlier this week, that what we need from the innovation team. Right. So we do not necessarily have good experience with the innovation team. And we all know that in the industry, it's no more even the elephant in the room. Like, I mean, we know that business needs to be involved. Innovation oftentimes, like, we don't sell if we enter to the company through innovation team. But what I saw and experienced at MetLife, which was exceptional, is that how much innovation team was committed and how innovation team is facilitating everything. But at the same time, they are bringing business team very quickly in the process. And from MetLife side, they had a very structured proof of concept process. So as what I learned at Data Robot, that we have to really build a structured proof of concept process. We have to write down everything, almost like the way consulting companies do it. But when we have a solid product, we still have to do it. Like, no, Data Robot has a killer product. Like, I mean, it is fascinating, but still we had to really build that process around the product that will make it easy for a customer to understand what they're getting into. And that's why I always say that we have to be, not only we have to be a quarterback, but we have to be a Tom Brady-like quarterback, that people will have hesitation, but when they will be looking at our eyes, they will say, oh, we are going to win the world because of this winning people. And this product and these people will make us successful, like, 6 months, 1 month, 1 year down the line. So that's kind of like, what is the general thing. And MetLife was heavily involved, and out of our 10 classes, 10 companies in the class, like, 4 people are actively doing the pilot right now. And we'll be starting it in January. We are launching our product in 15th of January. That's the goal. So right now we are razor focused on building the product. And so, yeah, so they are highly committed from that point of view. So it was very good experience altogether.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear it's going well for you. Even it is Techstars. So we, no, okay, we're big fans. So one of the things that, I was in a product management role in my previous life, and we were always hyper-focused on kind of the onboarding experience and retaining that customer. And it really comes down to a balance between, on one side, you got to make the product as intuitive and naturally easy to use as possible. On the other side of it, you also have to educate the user, right? So you can't, it's kind of a battle of both worlds, making it not too oversimplistic where it's not usable, but simply enough where they can get traction with it. But also you're gonna have to do a certain level of education on the user using the platform to fully understand how to, best maximize the value added. And this is a tough issue, and piloting is really the best way to solve that, right? Because it's a combination of both understanding how to adapt the product in the most intuitive way possible and soliciting feedback to do so, while also educating the end users and the end teams to figure out that they can take this internally, sell it on your behalf to the other business units, and make sure that they're very excited about the increase in value that's been created. Turning it over quickly to Chris, one thing I think QBE had an interesting conversation around, they invested in a startup company they brought internally, and they announced it to the company, and then immediately the company, all different business units reached out because they really wanted to leverage the startup. It's kind of an opposite problem that we usually have with our partners. But what happened was that startup company got completely inundated with too many requests. And as a startup company that's also taking on funding from that firm, and that's also a customer, you know, they really are not in a position to say no to a business unit that comes out and requests for a deal, even though they might not have the capacity to do so. So what QBE did was they cut that startup company off from the rest of the organization, and they made every other business unit apply to the QBE innovation team to get approval to then roll that startup company out so they wouldn't squash that startup company in that process. So I've seen similar things with XL Innovate. You know, you guys have so many strong companies in your portfolio, and you've done a really good job integrating those companies into your business in a manner that's not going to stifle them or kind of restrict them. What has XL Innovate done that's been such an effective landing pad for startup companies that you guys are working with?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great problem that QBE had, and certainly a great problem for the Insurtech involved. Certainly, you know, overwhelming and under-delivering, I think, is a huge pitfall that a lot of companies, a lot of startups in the space deal with. So I think communication is key. And really, I think in these relationships, both startups and insurers need to work together to create measurable milestones and metrics that clearly demonstrate success or failure in these relationships. I think all too often we see, you know, here's our problem, solve it for us. And I think where there's ambiguity and then surprises to the downside, that really takes a lot of the air out of the and momentum out of the equation there. So I think what's really important is to establish milestones that are clearly understood from both sides. And then basically once those are established, in the case of success, you can say, if this proof of concept is a success, then we will endeavor to do this X, Y, Z. I think in a lot of times, you know, where the scope and goals of a pilot aren't properly defined before initiating the POC, that's where you're setting yourself up for failure. So I applaud QBE a lot for basically reining back the business interest, because I think it's important to get the quick wins first before basically moving on to the bigger problems. And so from that perspective, I think you need both sides coming to the table with an open mind, but with the ability to communicate clearly, because, you know, if a startup fails to address the need of the insurer, whether that's through the wrong technology or misapplied solution, or simply fails to listen, there's no path to success. And so establishing what the path of success is, first and foremost, before you start, is I think the most important thing you can do.
Awesome. So we are running a little low on time, so sorry, Sim, I would have the next question start off with you, and we'll have that last one. So we've covered a lot of things. Obviously, I always like talking best practices, but I think everybody shared a ton of really good examples already. So kind of looking out in 2019, kind of talking what, you know, Steve and I were saying earlier about 18 kind of being studying the landscape, looking at opportunities, looking at the dating pool, and 2019 really being the decision-making year, and engaging in longer, more committed pilot opportunities or commercial agreements. So looking ahead at 2019, kind of just generally you know, speaking here, what do you guys think we're going to see that's going to be different in the market? You know, is it going to be companies that have now had more experience in the startup space making better committed deals? Do you think we're going to see pilot activity increase, or you think we're going to have more committed deals? And particularly, what are, you know, any best practices, or what are anything that you think corporations in the future need to keep in mind or need to consider in the evaluation process when deciding who they're going to move to full-scale commercial partnership with? So sorry to summarize that up one more time. What do you think is going to be the most impactful kind of trends in 2019 in terms of startup piloting activity? And secondly, what are the things that corporations need to keep in mind when deciding who should be the selected company to go into a full-scale commercial agreement with? And for this, we'll start with Simha.
Thanks, Hutch. So the way I look at it, based on my experience, the trajectory seems to be that there is a lot of appetite to try out these new technologies, particularly with artificial intelligence and machine learning becoming such big buzzwords. There's a lot of interest to explore what are the technologies that these companies can actually deploy. So from my perspective, we are having a lot more inbound requests than we are able to keep up with. So we are hiring quite a bit to keep up with that demand. So the next 2 years, I think, will be all about insurtechs and insurance companies, in fact, doing a lot of pilots to establish proof points in terms of whether these technologies can actually deliver on the automation, cost optimizations, or revenue top line growth that these technologies actually promise. And I think the good news is that some of these technologies are also becoming commoditized. So the accuracy levels are improving, and you'll see a lot more investments coming in from the insurance companies in the space itself. In terms of what coaching or guidance for corporates, I think the shocking thing for me when I started working with the very large enterprises from a procurement perspective was how onerous and how outdated some of these requests are. They're typically dealing with vendors who sell all kinds of services and products to these insurance companies. So they take the same yardstick and try to apply it to startups, right? So a small young company that has to demonstrate a specific pilot may need to answer 600 questions from a procurement perspective to actually make it past the gate to give peace of mind to those business teams that this is technology and solution that can actually meet the corporate governance requirements. So some of the work that needs to get done internally for a startup is to be structured and be able to punch way above your weight category in terms of being able to deal with those types of requirements. And we have done extremely well in terms of being ready with SOC 2 and other types of clients, whether it is GDPR or whether it is some TCPA or some other regulatory compliance, and being able to satisfy and get past the objections that a typical procurement team comes. I think those are some of the things. So finding a way to tone down that requirement for startups is probably necessary for them to select startups. Otherwise, it's hard for these established companies to work with startups because they're not really structured to deal with all of the governance requirements that companies have.
Got it. Chris, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, especially in the context of the POC Purgatory article. What do you think will be different in 2019? And are you hopeful that we will have a better chance of avoiding the Purgatory environment?
Yeah, no, I think we're really excited about what 2019 holds. And to your point earlier, I think that given where Insurtech basically started in 2015, where we are today, the time for experimentation and time for testing, I think, is now done. And we're very much looking forward to companies advancing beyond the proof of concept and into full licenses. I think both insurers and insurtechs are now getting better at understanding, okay, how do I manage these processes and how do I make sure that I'm getting what I want out of it in establishing these relationships? So I think the learnings have occurred, and I think that people are excited to implement these solutions, I think, more at scale. And scale is again, sort of beyond a sort of small business unit or beyond a 3-month testing period and into something that is truly impactful to the organization. So our expectation is that next year is the time of reckoning for Insurtech in a lot of ways. And we fully expect to see successes, but at the same time, we on the other side of the coin, we expect to see some failures as well. The business models need to be proven out by now, and if they aren't, then unfortunately some companies are going to go by the wayside. But I think the product market fit, the timing, and the receptivity in the market is something that has basically come to a head now, and we're really sort of going to take off at a really interesting point here in 2019.
Nice. 19, a year, start of Darwinism.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on to Satchidou next, and then Steve's going to let you close this out, be kind of the opener and the closer for us with the context of the article. Satchidou, I guess your timing is very good. If we're so hopeful for 19 and you starting a couple months ahead of that, what are you excited about changing in 2019 that you think is a particularly good timing for your startup?
Oh yeah, thank you so much. That's a great question. And DataRobot is moving through a exciting time, and I left DataRobot in that exciting time because I could not resist actually. So it was like, you know, Hello's Insurance is a product that we are trying to build insurance as a daily product as opposed to a rarely used product. And I will highlight two things. Number one is around the product. I think the insurance industry will start getting involved in the wider ecosystem, involving other industries. And we started seeing that already, that Ladder started working with SoFi, but similar things will happen more and more. So we'll be thinking about how we can tap into other industry and make insurance more relevant to everyday life. And that is going to be a big thing for whole industry, in my opinion. And we are actively working on that concept, that how we can make insurance more useful to every consumer, because only every year, less than 10% consumer actually get benefited from insurance. That the way it is defined now, because insurance only comes after an accident happens and they get a financial indemnification, as opposed to get something as soon as they start paying premium. So that is kind of a fundamental shift that we'll see in the next 1 year, 2 years and time frame. In terms of the process, I'm hoping and I'm pretty confident that we'll be moving faster as incumbents, as Insurtech companies, and as a whole as an industry. And a lot of insurance companies are becoming bigger, and they're getting more involved in the seed round. That is very exciting. I always believe that insurance companies, they have the domain knowledge. I came from AIG, Liberty Mutual, Deloitte, so I have that bias to understand that I have seen so many experts sitting in those large companies. So we know a lot about which has the biggest potential to become a bigger idea at the seed level. So what I would personally like to see that how incumbents are getting more involved at the seed stage as opposed to getting involved at a later stage. So that could be as a venture capitalist, as it is kind of puzzling to me that why would be dependent to the people from outside industry to assess something early on. So that is something we already started seeing, and there are some leaders in that space, of course. Excel is one of them. RGX, American Family is another example, and MetLife being involved so early on is another great example. So we'll see more and more. John Hancock is another I should highlight because of the program, and we'll see more and more that these are very encouraging news. And there are some more that I cannot share in the public forum, but I see that other insurance companies are getting into they're finding structure where they can involve with the seed stage more often. So that would be another point.
Yep. Sorry, I know we're running a little short on time. I hope this doesn't close out at 11. Steven, I kind of final thoughts. Obviously, there's a question, but I'm going to just let you kind of open up it however you would like to finish us out today. So you wrote the article. You've had a lot of great thought leadership. So kind of closing out the conversation today, what are anything that you think would be important for the audience to understand in the context of the article that you wrote?
Cool, I appreciate that. And I was kind of frantically writing notes as everyone was talking about. So let me see if I can consolidate these. It's interesting. I think 2016 and 2017, you had a lot of, especially on the incumbent side, a lot of people that were really trying to just understand what this whole Insurtech thing was all about. They were trying to understand, and they were also trying to balance that with whatever sort of legacy replacement of systems they were doing existing. So they couldn't really focus on this forward-looking stuff. Then you look at this year, and some of those legacy replacement projects are starting to close off. And they also have a better understanding of what these technologies can do, as well as what as customers are looking for across the value chain. So I think 2019, you're going to start seeing some more meaningful strides in that perspective, both in terms of product development, so the products that we see carriers offering to consumers, as well as just the way that they distribute those products and how they're actually playing that role in that overall ecosystem. With that, I think that to the points that were just made by some of the other panelists, we are going to see more later round investments as we start seeing some of these companies that are really starting to scale and show that value. I think you're going to start seeing some fallout from the companies that aren't able to make it and that aren't able to actually show that the value that they're bringing, and they're going to run out of that runway. And I think you're going to start seeing some consolidation amongst the vendors. So, you know, if there's a company that offers this part of the value chain and this part of the value chain and this part of the value chain, they can come together and say, actually, here's a full package solution that they can bring. And I know one of the companies that's doing that in a real big way is Surefy. You know, they're trying to kind of plug in all these different things and go to carriers and life carriers and say, we got the whole shebang for you here. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more maturation in this whole process. I don't see funding numbers going down, but maybe funding deals might go down a little bit. And I guess for both sides of the equation, the best thing, and it goes along the lines of what we've been talking about, is just focus. Focus on what you're looking for. Focus on what you can bring to the table. Focus on what it is that you can do, and then just focus on delivering and making sure that you get everyone around the table involved in the process. And that's what's really going to keep on driving this movement forward.
Absolutely. No, I think one of the major themes we're hearing a lot is, so it sounds like, you know, 2019, we'll be making great strides away from reckless experimentation and more into structured, focused experimentation, which I think is exactly the right next step in that phase. So wonderful. You guys, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you to Katie and Eric for putting this on. This is a reoccurring segment we're going to getting started. So this is just our second webinar, and I want to thank everybody for participating. We've had a very impressive panel here today, so we have our work cut out for us next time, that's for sure. But thank you to, you know, Satchadu, we have Simha here, we have Chris, and we have Stephen. It was a wonderful conversation, and looking forward to seeing everybody next time. Eric, do you want to have any kind of parting words?
Eric, you're muted.
Oh, Eric, I think you're muted, bud.
Hey, just wanted to thank you to all the panelists again. Looking forward to the next one.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.